Welcome to this edition of Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters Greater Omaha. I'm Cindy Glissman, co-president of the League, and your host for today's program on Raise the Wage Ballot Initiative. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse political candidates or parties. The League does, however, take position on issues. Our purpose is to empower voters and defend democracy. Go Vote Omaha focuses on policy issues, and as a result of our discussions, we hope you will feel ready to make informed decisions at election times. I'm joined today by two people from Nebraska Appleseed, Vic Clafter, campaigns organizer, and Diane Amdor, as economic justice attorney. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Both of these wonderful people are working on Raise the Wage Nebraska Ballot Initiative campaign. Let's start our discussion today just by learning a little bit about Nebraska Appleseed. So Vic, do you want to tell me a little bit, in our audience, a little bit about Nebraska Appleseed and what a campaign organizer does?
Yeah, so Nebraska Appleseed is a nonprofit organization, and we fight for justice and opportunity for all Nebraskans. And that takes on various systemic issues in Nebraska, including economic justice, like the minimum wage, child welfare, immigration, and healthcare access. And so in my role as a campaigns organizer for the minimum wage initiative specifically, I am working with volunteers and those who are passionate about getting signatures on petitions and getting this on the ballot, as well as talking with and building relationships with people who are directly affected by this issue to help amplify their voices and really keeping the reason why for the issue at the forefront of the campaign.
Excellent, great. And Diane, tell me about Nebraska Seed's mission and goals, and then what an economic justice attorney does at Appleseed.
Sure. So as Vic mentioned, Nebraska Appleseed works for justice and equality for all Nebraskans. And as a staff attorney, my role is to be responsible for research, policy development, and litigation support within our economic justice program.
That's interesting. Okay. So now let's turn more to actually let's talk about what the Raise the Wage Ballot Initiative is all about. Diane, do you want to explain the initiative to our audience?
Sure. So I think Vic mentioned Nebraska Appleseed is one of the coalition members for the Raise the Wage Nebraska campaign. And there are three official ballot initiative sponsors, Senator Terrell McKinney, Nancy Williams from No More Empty Pots, Omaha,
No more.
and Zeke Rouse, thank you. And I don't know if you want to say anything else about some of the other coalition members.
It's a really strong coalition of, there's 22 members overall, including a couple senators, Senator McKinney and Senator Hunt, as well as a wide array of organizations, many of whom are rooted here in Omaha, maybe are working statewide or especially focused on Omaha. No More Empty Pots, Planned Parenthood, even also up to the west of Grand Island, or the YWCA of Grand Island, as well as the YWCA of Lincoln, and just, a big variety of folks who are taking this on.
It does sound like a big variety. Wow. So how did this get started, and then tell us about the details maybe about the initiative, Diane?
Sure. So the coalition was officially formed back in, I want to say, the spring of this year.
Okay.
And then ballot language was filed late this summer, early this fall. There's kind of four important aspects to the policy proposal. Okay. The first piece is basic and straightforward. We want to change Nebraska's standard minimum wage to $15 an hour. Another piece of that is we want to phase those changes in over time. So some of the national partners who we've worked with, experts in this field, recommend no more than $2 per year as an increase when you're phasing this in. It makes it easier for businesses to adapt while still being not such an incremental change that workers don't see an actual benefit over that time. So our proposal is $1.50 per year over the course of 4 years. And you can compare that to Initiative 425, which was the last time Nebraska raised our minimum wage in 2014. That initiative increased it 75 cents the first year and then $1 the second year. And that was just a 2-year change, and that got us to our current $9 an hour. The third important piece of this initiative is indexing the change to account for cost of living increases. I mean, basically, nobody wants to keep voting on this issue every few years, right? It saves time, it saves taxpayer resources to not have to keep talking about this, whether it's legislatively or through a ballot initiative like we're doing this year, to make changes to our minimum wage. So that would make it automatic after we reach the $15 an hour point. And then the fourth piece of this initiative is really a piece that's not included, but it's important to mention, I think. It was a very difficult decision not to include raising the tipped minimum wage in this particular ballot initiative. Due to some single subject rule issues that exist in Nebraska's constitution and a recent, from the last election cycle, decision from the Nebraska Supreme Court, we felt that that would be a separate issue and therefore couldn't be included in this ballot initiative. So while increasing the minimum wage will begin to address decades of wage disparities in both racial and gender pay gap issues, this particular initiative does not change Nebraska's tipped minimum wage, which is currently sitting at $2.13 per hour. So those four aspects are all rolled into one, and I know that Vic is an expert at relaying the actual language that's on the petition. So I don't know if you want to show off your skills there with summarizing all of that.
Sure, please, yes.
So at the top of each petition, I read this aloud to every signer, saying the object of the petition is to amend Nebraska's minimum wage law to increase the state minimum wage from $9 an hour to $10.50 an hour, January 1st, 2023, to then $12 an hour, January 1st, 2024, to $13.50 an hour, January 1st, 2025, and then to $15 an hour.
$1.50 per increase, okay.
And then that is January 1st, 2026, that would go into effect. And then it would be adjusted annually thereafter to account for increases in the cost of living. And it's fun reading that and seeing people nod along and then going, oh yeah, okay, adjust for the cost of living, makes sense, let's do that. It's
so
logical.
let's just, I don't want to interrupt you, but let's just talk about the last time, just make a point, the last time that Nebraska's minimum wage was increased. Number one, correct me, but it was $7.25?
It was starting at
$7.25, and it took a ballot initiative to increase that, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
and so that is one of the things that this issue, or this amendment, wants to change. We don't want, as you pointed out, Diane, this amendment does not want to get in a situation where we have to have a ballot amendment every time we want the minimum wage to increase.
Yeah.
Correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, great. And then the other thing I think I heard you say too is that we want a phased increase. So because we don't want to just all of a sudden make, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the idea is to gradually increase this for both, so businesses and workers are gradually, this is phased in both for workers and for businesses, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Really more so for the businesses. I don't know that there's
Okay.
any workers out there who would complain if we
Okay.
if we switched the wage
Fair
to
enough.
$15 an hour this year. But I do think that would pose some implementation challenges that then would make it questionable of whether we could get this on the ballot and get it passed
Fair
next
enough.
November.
Great. Okay. Thank you for specifying, make sure I
Yeah.
understand all this. Okay, good.
And
So-
on the tipped minimum wage
Yes,
side of
yes,
things,
yes.
it is important to note that here in Omaha, at least, there's a campaign, I think, going by the name of Power of People, is working to raise the tipped minimum wage
Great.
to, well, the minimum wage in Omaha to $15 an hour, and that does include tipped workers. So that would
Interesting.
not be a statewide change, but that's a separate Omaha initiative that is happening now and could be on the ballot.
Since it would be an Omaha City ordinance, it follows a very different process than a statewide initiative.
Okay.
But yes, it is still trying to address that historical
Okay.
inequity and pay gap.
Okay, we'll make a note of that for our next show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. So Vic, tell us why Nebraska Appleseed believes the minimum wage should be increased.
Yeah. Kind of where to start.
Yeah.
I get the privilege of talking to folks, at least sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and offering them the opportunity to sign. And I get so many enthusiastic responses from people who are like, yeah, like this should have happened a long time ago. And there's an MIT calculation of the cost of living in Nebraska that calculates if you go kind of across the state. It's a little bit higher in Lincoln and Omaha, but if you generalize across the state, it's around $13.50 for one person to meet their needs. And with a minimum wage of $9, that's clearly so disconnected from that cost of living. And so
Sure.
at its base, raising the minimum wage is kind of trying to have Nebraskans answer the question, do people deserve, if they're working, do they deserve to have a wage that lets them live, lets them meet their needs? And we don't want people to just get by, to just survive. They are cheated of so much in their whole life, and their community is too. And so we do best as Nebraskans when everyone can meet their needs and can meet the needs of their loved ones based off a wage that's fair and that is actually connected with how much things cost. There's a couple people that come to mind of folks that I've gotten to talk to and really get more of their story. One person, she's here in Omaha, and she worked 2 minimum wage jobs at the same time, sometimes pushing 70 hours a week to get by. Did not have support from parents as she had left high school and was just trying to establish herself as a young adult. And it was incredibly hard and took a huge toll on her physical and mental health. And she has so much to offer the community that she was not able to. There's 2 people I can think of who are in the caregiving and early childhood education profession, and their work so undervalued, and they love their jobs, and they love to care for the vulnerable elderly adults and the young children that they do, and they want to stay in those jobs, but it makes it incredibly difficult for both of these folks, afford the mortgage that they bought their house with when they had a wage that was connected to the cost of living in 5, 10, 15 years past. So these are real people in Nebraska who are making really tough decisions and really are passionate about their work. They want to do the work, and it's important work, but the wages don't add up for them to actually be able to afford to do that work.
Right. Interesting. Right. So, Diane, can you tell us more about who in Nebraska really would be affected by if we increase the minimum wage? What Nebraskans are earning?
Sure. So there's a report that was compiled earlier this year by the Economic Policy Institute that estimates that there are 195,000 Nebraskans whose income would increase due to this change. So that's people who are currently earning somewhere between $9 an hour and $15 an hour. Raising the minimum wage will help close the gender pay gap that currently exists. That same study noted that 60% of Nebraskans who would benefit from an increase in the minimum wage are women. This would also address the racial pay gap. That same study again noted that 32% of Nebraskans who would benefit from an increase in the minimum wage are people of color.
Thank you. So then, Vic, when I hear then someone tell me, well, people earning the minimum wage are really, those teenagers who are maybe working at Burger King or maybe on the weekend just for spending money. What do you say about that?
There are definitely teenagers who work in these realms and earn in this range, and that is not the vast majority of the folks who would be benefited by this. 80% of Nebraskans who would be benefited by this raise are 20 years or older. And I would also say to that, we Nebraskans, I think, value hard work no matter who's doing it, and whether that is a teenager who is working hard at a fast food restaurant, at a family business, wherever that is, they also deserve a fair wage there, and this is something we don't have to look at it from a lens of deficit. We want to benefit those 80% who are 20 years and older, who are living on their own, maybe have dependents. That having one child makes $11 an hour impossible. But also the young adults and the teenagers, they are part of the economy, and they are contributing, and they're learning what hard work and a fair wage means, and I don't think they should be discounted in the benefit of this as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Diane, we are in the middle of a pandemic. Is now the time to be talking about raising the minimum wage?
I would say absolutely. In a recent campaign event a few weeks ago. I think it was Amy Bennett from the YWCA of Grand Island was talking about this issue and just reminiscing on how throughout the pandemic we celebrated essential workers with social media posts, with yard signs, but it's 2021 and there's people out here who've been for over a year now working for minimum wage doing what became high-risk jobs, a cashier at a grocery store. 2 years ago you wouldn't have called that a high-risk position probably, but now I think we can acknowledge that these really are some jobs that needed to be filled, and people stepped up and came to work and kept coming to work, and they deserve to be compensated in a way that where they can at least meet their basic living needs.
Right. Okay. And what does the data say, Vic, about if we raise the minimum wage, what does that do to the cost of our products on the shelves?
Inflation is a very common concern that I hear from folks, and we've been experiencing a lot of inflation, but inflation is caused by a lot of complicated factors, oil reserves and supply chain issues being just a couple of those that don't have to do with the minimum wage. And we've seen that the minimum wage has not increased technically in Nebraska since 2016 when the last bit of the ballot initiative was implemented, but yet we've seen lots of inflation, and that's something that I think we can all kind of identify, and thus we can't correlate that to a raise in the minimum wage. And additionally, there are studies that have shown that a 10% increase in the minimum wage, there is accompanying that a less than 1% increase in prices. It still does not demonstrate an actual connection there or a causal relationship, but still a very disproportionate even affected there in the numbers of a 10% and a 1% increase in prices. I often am just really pleased when folks will come to me with that concern, because I think we feel that. When we're buying milk and we're buying these things that everyone just sees, we see the price goes up, or if we feel it, I feel it. But when folks kind of ask me, I'm concerned about this, and they really are listening, I think that it's a pretty logical and pretty simple kind of thing that we can get around. A lot of folks are willing to change their position or be willing to hear that, but it's a kind of a myth that we've been fed for a long time, that minimum wage has something to do with inflation that we experience, but it doesn't really.
Good to know. This, along those lines too, how would, if the minimum wage was raised, how would that affect small businesses in Nebraska?
Like Diane was saying about the gradual implementation, that being taken from best practices from national partners to accommodate for businesses, and small businesses are incredibly important. We value them. They're an important part of the fabric of our local economies, and the employees working for these small businesses also deserve wages with which they can meet their needs. And that incremental phase-in is a way to kind of give some plan time for those small businesses to move around where they put in certain monies and allocations. And there is a lot of asset and benefit that can come from small businesses paying their employees a wage that they can stay there at that business and they can grow their skill, they can really invest in that business right back. And I think this is especially a salient point for rural spaces where there are fewer workers generally, and so having those folks stay in the community as well is really important. And how could we expect them to do that if they aren't earning a wage where they can pay for their needs?
Good point. So Diane, review one more time for us then that if the ballot initiative or the minimum wage, raise the wage ballot initiative gets on the ballot in November, tell us exactly what would happen in the future. The steps.
So if we get on the ballot in November, then people will be able to vote at that election and decide whether or not to make this change.
And let's assume it passes. So tell us.
So then starting January 1st of 2023, the minimum wage will go up $1.50.
Okay.
It'll do that for 4 years in a row. And then January 1st, so then October of 2026, the the Department of Labor will then be responsible for figuring out what that cost of living increase will be for the 5th year of the change.
Okay.
And so in October of that year and every year going forward, they will publish how much the minimum wage will increase on January 1st of the following year.
And wages would go up, minimum wage would go up accordingly.
Correct.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for walking us through Raise the Wage Initiative. Let's pivot a little bit and just go through the mechanics, and so make sure that we all understand then how a ballot initiative process works, because I know that's kind of your everyday job now, besides explaining all of this to everybody. So, Diane, how does a ballot initiative become law?
So you have to collect signatures, and the number of signatures is tied to the number of registered voters on the date of the filing deadline. And the filing deadline is 4 months before the general election. So
Okay.
that means for the November 2022 election, so that means early June 2022 is when we have to get the signatures to the Secretary of State.
Early July.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Every minute counts.
Yes,
so.
right, you have that
It's not that
on
early.
your circled on your calendar.
And that number is over 87,000 petition signatures.
Must be like
Must be collected.
valid, or,
And
okay,
verified.
verified.
Yes,
Okay, okay.
verified. So
Okay.
we will be collecting more than that, but
Okay.
the bare minimum number is around 87,000. And that is 7% of the registered voters in the state at the time of the filing deadline. And then those signatures have to come from 5% of the registered voters in 38 of Nebraska's 93 counties.
Okay, so you can't just go park yourself at a mall and get everybody who comes there.
And
You
just
need
do that
to
spot.
get a
Exactly.
good variety of voters,
It's a
correct?
statewide initiative. It's
Okay.
gonna take folks from across the state to get this on the ballot and
All right,
passed.
okay, interesting, okay. And so who can sign this? I mean,
Yeah.
besides a variety of people, what other
Registered
requirements do they
Nebraskan
need?
voters, you know,
Registered
whether we
voters.
meet someone
Okay.
from Cass County in Ogallala, they could sign there as long as they're registered in Nebraska.
Okay.
And so we have circulators in a lot of Lancaster, Douglas, and Sarpy County areas, but then we're also, going out to more rural spaces, and as long as you're
Okay.
a registered Nebraska voter, you
Okay.
can sign.
Maybe I missed it. What percent of the counties need to?
5%.
Okay, all right, okay, great. So I actually checked on the Secretary of State's website today, and I counted 13 petitions on the website today.
There are a lot this year.
So, yes. So do you recommend that people read carefully or talk to the people that are out there with their clipboards and
I definitely, I know that people get petition fatigue, and I get it. There's a lot of issues that are trying to be addressed, and I think absolutely every circulator should be following the rules, the law, which is to read aloud that object statement that I rattled off earlier. So knowing what it is, but I think it's also exciting that there's so many groups that are wanting to take initiative on things, and especially groups of people are wanting to address economic justice and disparities like this.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so what happens if you do get enough signatures and it does get on the ballot, Raise the Wage does get on the ballot, and it passes? Then it becomes, tell me again the dates.
So the signatures have to be in by July of
Okay.
2022. Election November 2022. The
Okay.
first increase would be January 1st,
January 1st,
2023.
so right away.
Yep,
So
right away.
Okay, and
Right
what
away.
happens if it does not get on the ballot, if we don't get enough signatures across the state?
Yeah. So if it doesn't get on the ballot, one option is to go to the legislature and try and get it passed that way. One of the petition sponsors, Senator McKinney, has a bill currently in the legislature, which won't do anything if it doesn't pass next November,
Right.
but he will still be a senator, so he could bring another bill, or another senator could bring another bill to try and pass it that route. The other option is to try again with a ballot initiative. So that would be starting from square one, file language with the Secretary of State, collect more signatures. The language could be the same language or similar to the medical marijuana campaign from the last election cycle. So they had a challenge in the Nebraska Supreme Court.
Right.
The Supreme Court said that that their language did not meet the single subject requirements of the Nebraska Constitution. So the organizers of that initiative have reworked the language, filed, I believe they are a couple of the separate ballot measures that are trying to get on the ballot this time around. And so that's the other route that you can try for.
Okay. So we've learned so much today. What if people want to get involved? I assume there are many levels of involvement that people might want to help collect signatures or publicize this issue. What would you suggest they get?
The best first spot is raisethewagenebraska.org. That's our website. You can find out more about the policy. There's spaces to let us know you want to get involved as a circulator. I can get you trained. You can also find places. Our social media is on there as well that helps amplify some stories and generally just bringing awareness, because I think there's a surprising number of folks who think our minimum wage is higher than it already is, and it definitely isn't, or they just don't know the ballot initiative is happening yet.
Sure. Great. Where can we look for? Are you out daily, or where, if we wanted to go, if we wanted to sign the petition, what should we do?
There will be circulators at the Benson First Friday on tomorrow evening.
Okay.
So if you're here in Omaha, that will be a place you can go see some art as well. But it just kind of depends week by week where the people are, and we go where people are.
Awesome, great. Is there any last plug you would like to? We have about 30 seconds.
I'm reminded that our state works best when Nebraskans are paid enough to take care of themselves and their loved ones, and that's what this ballot initiative seeks to do.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Cindy.
I appreciate Nebraska Appleseed, all the work they do. Vic Cantor and Diane Amder, thank you very much for being here and educating us about ballot initiatives in general and Raise the Wage ballot initiative in particular. So I am Cindy Glissman from the League of Women Voters, encouraging you to stay informed and be ready to go vote Omaha.